At my sister's wedding, Mom stood up to give her speech. She called my sister the pride of our family, her voice thick with pride. The room filled with applause. Then, while everyone was still smiling, she turned to me, slid an envelope across the table, and said clearly enough for half the guests to hear, "The remaining $3,200 for the reception? That's yours to cover Forks froze." Glasses stopped midair. My sister looked away, and I sat there, realizing I wasn't family in her eyes. I was just the bill. My name is Lucas. I'm 30 years old, a graphic designer living above a quiet bookstore in a small apartment that smells faintly of old paper and fresh coffee. I don't make a fortune, but I get by. My rent is steady, my student loans manageable, and I've carved out a simple rhythm for myself. Take out sushi on Fridays, long walks on Sundays, and the occasional small trip when I can afford to splurge. I've never been the kind of person who needs center stage. Growing up, I was the dependable one. The quiet kid teachers liked because my homework was always neat and on time. In my family, that role stuck to me like glue. My mom quickly realized I was the one who would do things without complaint. When the car broke down, I researched mechanics. When my dad forgot to book a venue, I made the calls. When my sister needed custom invitations for her engagement party, I stayed up past midnight designing them, even with my own deadlines breathing down my neck. And each time, the response was the same. My mom would smile politely, pat my shoulder, and say, "That's nice, honey." Then she'd turn and gush to relatives about how brilliant my sister was, how she'd landed an impressive job, how she lit up every room, how she was the pride of our family. It didn't matter that I'd just solved the problem, paid the bill, or saved the day. My efforts were invisible, or worse, expected, like oxygen. No one thanks the air they breathe. I told myself it didn't matter. I convinced myself I didn't need the spotlight, that being useful was its own form of love. But there's a fine line between being valued and being used. Over the years, I felt that line blur until I couldn't tell the difference. By the time my sister's wedding came around, I'd already done more than I care to admit. I helped coordinate the rehearsal dinner, rushed across town to pick up missing decor, and even fronted small costs when vendors demanded deposits. I didn't complain, not out loud. Somewhere deep down, though, I hoped maybe this time would be different. Maybe, for once, Mom would acknowledge me, not just for what I provided, but for who I was. That hope shattered the moment she stood in front of 100 guests, praised my sister as her pride and joy, and then handed me a $3,200 bill as though that was the only part I had to play in the celebration. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, the sound of applause still echoing, realizing how brutally clear my role had been all along. I wasn't the son to be proud of. I wasn't the sibling to celebrate. I was the safety net, the background worker, the invisible checkbook. And that night, something inside me quietly shifted. The wedding wasn't the first time I'd felt the sting of being invisible. If anything, it was just the loudest reminder of a truth I'd been living with for years. A week before the ceremony, I was at my sister's apartment helping her finalize a few details. She and Hannah, her maid of honor, were fussing over table centerpieces. My job? Drive across town to pick up a second set of vases because the first ones apparently looked too cheap on camera. I didn't mind the errand. What caught me was the way Mom praised my sister afterward. "You have such an eye for beauty, sweetheart," she said, adjusting the flowers with a proud little smile. I stood there holding the receipt, still smelling faintly of glass cleaner from the store clerk's rag, and waited. Not for speech, just a nod, a thank you. Something. Nothing. It was like I wasn't even in the room. That wasn't new. On my 25th birthday, Mom organized a dinner at our favorite restaurant. Halfway through dessert, she raised her glass, not to me but to my sister, who had just received a small promotion at work. "Here's to our pride," she said. Everyone clinked glasses and I sat there, my own slice of cake growing cold. At first I told myself it was coincidence, that maybe Mom just slipped into talking about my sister because she was excited, that maybe forgetting to mention me wasn't intentional. But patterns don't lie. Graduation? I walked the stage with honors. Mom snapped a picture, clapped politely, and then spent the after party bragging about how my sister had landed an internship with a real future. Christmas? I bought Mom the stand mixer she'd wanted for years. My sister gave her a scented candle. Guess which gift was described later as so thoughtful it made me cry? It wasn't about competition. I wasn't trying to outshine anyone. But the quiet erasure piled up until it started to feel deliberate, like I was cast in a role I couldn't step out of. The reliable backdrop, the one who did the work while someone else took the bow. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, the signs grew sharper. I handled the calligraphy for the seating chart, the late-night runs for missing supplies, even the phone calls with the baker when the frosting design wasn't quite right. My sister thanked me once, briefly, while scrolling through her phone. "Mom?" She just nodded and said, "That's expected. You're good at these behind-the-scenes things, behind the scenes." That phrase stuck like a splinter because that was exactly how it felt. I wasn't family, not really. I was crew, stagehand, the one who taped wires to the floor so no one tripped, who fixed problems before anyone noticed, who made sure the spotlight shone uninterrupted on someone else. So when the moment came at the wedding, Mom's proud speech, the applause, and then the envelope with a $3,200 bill, it didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the final, crushing confirmation of something I'd suspected all along. That, in her eyes, my value wasn't who I was. It was what I could pay. Patterns became stories. Stories became expectations. And those expectations hardened into a role I never auditioned for, but kept being shoved into anyway. It was never just about the wedding. The wedding was simply the stage where years of small humiliations came together under a spotlight. I remember my high school graduation vividly. I'd worked 2 part-time jobs while keeping my grades high enough to graduate near the top of my class. That night, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally hear Mom brag about me the way she always bragged about my sister. Instead, she waved away my diploma like it was a receipt and launched into a story about how my sister, who was only a freshman at the time, was already being scouted for advanced math programs. People clapped. My diploma stayed folded on the table. Birthdays weren't really mine either. My 21st? I wanted something simple, just a dinner with family. Mom insisted we combine it with my sister's pre-law celebration because, in her words, everyone's already planning to be in town anyway. That night, I blew out candles while my sister gave a speech about her dreams of becoming an attorney. Guess which part of the evening made it into family photo albums? Even holidays had a way of underlining the hierarchy. One Christmas, I saved up to buy Dad a new set of tools, the exact model he'd been eyeing. My sister handed him a tie she picked up the night before. He wore the tie all winter. The tools stayed in their box, still taped shut when I visited months later. Every time I tried to brush it off, another moment came along to confirm the quiet verdict. My contributions were practical, invisible, and disposable. Hers? Celebrated, framed, immortalized. So when Mom told me, 2 weeks before the wedding, that I'd need to pitch in more than usual, I didn't even flinch. I thought she meant errands, maybe covering a late invoice. I didn't realize she meant bankrolling someone else's spotlight. The signs were all there if I looked back. The time she sighed in disappointment when I mentioned my modest salary, then immediately gushed about how my sister's internship had so much potential. The way she'd introduce us at family gatherings, "This is my pride and joy," gesturing to my sister, then adding my name as an afterthought. The way, when bills piled up at home, it was always my phone that buzzed, never hers. By the time the wedding day arrived, I wasn't surprised by how easily I slipped back into my role. Carrying boxes, checking seating arrangements, smoothing crises before they broke the surface. No one saw it. No one cared. And when the band struck the first note of the reception and Mom took the microphone, I already knew how the script would play out. My sister's name would soar. Mine would vanish. But I didn't expect the applause to end with an envelope, or for the applause itself to sound like a price tag. The reception hall glowed with fairy lights and polished glassware. Laughter rose like steam from every table, the air buzzing with the relief that the vows had been spoken and the ceremony was done. For once I thought maybe I could just coast through the evening, eat the catered meal, clink a glass, disappear quietly when the dancing started. Then Mom stood up. She tapped her glass with a spoon, the bright ting 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 slicing through conversation until the whole room fell quiet. "First of all," she began, her voice lilting with pride, "let's give another round of applause for my beautiful daughter, the bride." People clapped, cheering, some standing to toast. My sister glowed, her white dress shimmering under the chandeliers. "And I have to say," Mom continued, drawing out the pause, "she has always been, will always be, my pride, my shining star." I smiled faintly because what else could I do? The script was familiar. I'd heard it at graduations, at family reunions, at any event where my sister so much as breathed in the right direction. But then Mom turned, scanning the tables until her eyes landed on me. "And of course," she added, her tone shifting into something practical, almost transactional, "none of this happens without help. Family help." I felt a few people glance at me, the way you glance at a waiter about to clear plates. Mom raised an envelope, crisp and white, and held it up like it was part of the decor. "So, on behalf of the family, I want to thank Lucas for stepping up, as always. And to make things easier, sweetheart, here's the final invoice." She said it with a laugh, like it was a punchline. The room went quiet in that strange, heavy way where laughter can't quite find its footing. She walked the envelope across the floor and set it down in front of me. "It's just $3,200. After all, weddings are expensive, and you know how important family tradition is." I stared at the envelope. I could feel heat climbing my neck, the kind of heat you get when a spotlight pins you down and there's no exit. A murmur passed around the table. A couple across from me avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their wine glasses. One of my cousins mouthed "wow" before quickly turning away. Even my sister, the bride, the pride, the shining star, kept her eyes locked on her champagne, swirling the bubbles like they contained some answer. She didn't object, didn't protest, didn't even blink. Dad sat stiffly at his seat, his jaw tight, but he said nothing either. The band started shuffling their sheet music awkwardly. The DJ fiddled with the soundboard, trying to cue something light to dissolve the tension, but the silence stretched on. I picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it. Not just the paper and ink, but the years behind it. The birthdays that weren't mine. The graduations overshadowed. The Christmas mornings where my gifts were tools while hers were trophies. The weight wasn't $3,200. It was every dollar, every favor, every unseen sacrifice that had paved the path for this moment. And in that instant, the realization landed sharp and cold. I wasn't the guest here. I wasn't even family in the way they defined it. I was the ATM at the edge of the room, and Mom had just announced the withdrawal to 100 witnesses. I didn't stay for the cake. By the time the band struck up its first upbeat number, I had already slipped out. No one tried to stop me. A few people glanced up as I walked past their tables, but their eyes darted away the second mine met theirs. Nobody wanted to be caught watching the fallout. The hotel lobby felt colder than the reception hall. The carpet muffled my footsteps. As I made my way to the elevators, the envelope still clutched in my hand like evidence. The mirrored walls reflected a version of me I barely recognized. Tight jaw, hollow eyes, shoulders drawn tight like I was bracing for another blow. Inside my room, the silence pressed in. I sat on the edge of the bed, tore the envelope open, and spread the papers across the comforter. Itemized charges, typed neatly in black ink, floral arrangements, catering extras, even the fee for the late-night shuttle bus that would ferry tipsy relatives back to their hotels. Every line was another cut, another reminder that, to my family, I wasn't there as a guest. I was a line item, a source of funds. I opened my laptop almost on instinct and logged into my online banking. Years of statements stretched back, page after page, rent deposits, utilities, groceries, and then, scattered like bruises, transfers and payments that weren't really mine. 2 years ago, $600 emergency for Mom when her car battery died. She'd promised to pay it back. She never did. Last Christmas, $450 for the catering deposit on a family dinner that my sister hosted. Everyone had praised her generosity. No one had mentioned my credit card. 6 months ago, $1,200 for new bridesmaid dresses after she changed her mind about the color scheme. Supposedly temporary, I was still waiting. And now, $3,200, written out like it was my duty, like it was tradition. I scrolled through the transactions until the screen blurred. The numbers didn't even sting anymore. What stung was the realization that none of it had ever been accidental. I had been groomed into this role: silent provider, quiet fixer, invisible sibling. The one who covered the gaps so the pride of the family could shine without shadows. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Dad. "Just let it go, you know how your mom is." Another from Mom. "We'll talk tomorrow. Don't ruin your sister's big day." And one from my sister, finally. "Sorry about tonight. Hope you understand." 3 words, typed carelessly, almost smug in their brevity. Hope you understand. I set the phone down face first and let the room swallow me. For the first time, I didn't feel anger rising. Not the sharp, explosive kind. This was different. Heavy. Quiet. Like standing in a snowstorm where everything is muffled and cold and still. I leaned back against the headboard, the glow of the laptop still open beside me, and realized I was staring at a pattern. Not just numbers, but proof. Proof that no matter how much I gave, they would never see me as anything more than a safety net. And safety nets aren't supposed to be noticed. They're just supposed to catch the fall. I closed the laptop, slid the papers back into the envelope, and placed it on the nightstand. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing with startling clarity. This had been my last fall to catch. The knock came just after 9 the next morning. 3 sharp raps, deliberate, the kind that didn't ask permission so much as announce inevitability. I knew it was her before I even checked the peephole. Mom always carried herself like the world owed her a hearing. She stood in the hallway in yesterday's dress, shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, mascara smudged faintly under her eyes. She didn't wait for an invitation. The moment I cracked the door, she slipped inside like smoke. The silence stretched as she took in the half-packed suitcase on the chair, the envelope on the nightstand. She sighed, heavy and theatrical, then turned to me with that look, half pity, half disappointment. "You left early," she said, as if it were a crime. People noticed. I didn't answer, just sat back on the edge of the bed, arms crossed. She perched on the chair across from me, folding her hands like she was about to deliver a sermon. "You know how weddings are. Expenses pile up. Families share the burden. It's tradition." The word landed like a stone. Tradition. That was her favorite shield, the magic charm she used to reframe exploitation as heritage. I let her keep talking. She explained how Sarah was under so much pressure, how the venue had overcharged, how it's only fair that I contribute since I wasn't married yet and didn't have children to support. Finally, she leaned forward, lowering her voice into something she probably thought was tender. "One day, when it's your turn, your sister will step up for you." That's how families work. I almost laughed. The picture of Sarah, my sister who'd never paid me back a cent, who hadn't even texted more than "hope you understand," writing a check for me someday? It was absurd. I met my mother's eyes. "No," I said softly. She blinked as if she hadn't heard me right. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm done." That was my last favor. The room seemed to contract around the words. She straightened, her mouth opening and closing, struggling for footing. "You don't mean that. You're just upset. Family doesn't keep score." I gestured toward the envelope on the nightstand. "Family shouldn't hand out bills either." Her face flushed, not with shame but indignation. "You've always been so ungrateful." "We gave you everything." "No," I cut in, still calm. "You gave Sarah everything. You gave me the bill." The quietness of my tone unsettled her more than shouting ever could. For once I wasn't pleading, wasn't explaining, wasn't swallowing it down. I stood and walked to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to let a shaft of daylight spill across the carpet. I'm not paying $3,200. I'm not paying any more hidden favors. I'll send Sarah a small gift, something of my choosing, and that's it. From here on out, I live on my own terms, she rose to, voice trembling between anger and desperation. You'll regret this. When you need us, when you're alone, I turned back, meeting her gaze without flinching. If needing you means paying for the privilege, I'd rather be alone. For a moment, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like the script she'd relied on for decades had finally run out of lines. She grabbed her shawl tighter, muttered something about not understanding family duty, and walked out without another glance. The door clicked shut. I exhaled, slow and steady, feeling the quiet settle over me again. Not the suffocating kind, but the liberating kind. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. I wasn't the one footing the bill. And I wasn't sorry. I didn't go back to the reception hall, didn't check in with my sister, didn't even respond to the handful of awkward texts from cousins asking if I'd made it home safe. Instead, I checked out of the hotel a day early, slid my keycard across the counter, and drove until the venue was a distant blur in my rearview mirror. In the days that followed, the family group chat lit up like a bonfire. Photos of Sarah in her white dress, toasts from relatives, the usual captions about a perfect day. My name never appeared once. I didn't post anything either. Silence became my contribution. When the final bill landed in my inbox, an itemized statement with my name highlighted at the bottom, I replied with exactly one sentence. I'll be sending $200 as a wedding gift. I attached a note through the bank transfer. This is my choice, not my obligation. No one responded. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. Months passed. Life filled in the space my family used to occupy. I took a new job in another city, one that valued my skills without introducing me as someone else's sibling. I rented a modest apartment near the river, started biking on weekends, even joined a local book club where no one knew my history. Every so often, I'd get a call from home. I let most go to voicemail. When I did pick up, Mom's tone had shifted, less commanding, more cautious. She'd ask about the weather, about work, about anything except money. From Sarah, I heard nothing directly, just fragments carried through relatives, the catering company demanding payment. Her honeymoon delayed because of unexpected expenses, whispers about credit cards and overdue balances. I didn't smile when I heard, didn't gloat. It wasn't my burden anymore. 1 year later, on a quiet evening in my new city, I sat on my balcony watching the streetlights flicker on below. My phone buzzed with a notification, a tagged photo from a cousin. Sarah again. This time, not in a gown, but in a thrift store blazer, hair tied back, smile thin. The caption read, "First week at the new job, starting fresh." I stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down. Starting fresh. That's what we'd both done, in our own ways, but only one of us had learned that fresh starts don't come from other people paying your bills. I sipped my coffee, letting the city hum beneath me. Sometimes dignity isn't about shouting louder. It isn't about winning the argument or making them feel the sting of payback. Sometimes dignity is quieter. It's writing a smaller check, packing your suitcase, and walking away, bill unpaid. And that's exactly what I did.